Headhunters are looking to understand your profile quickly and easily. I think sometimes people can sort of want to communicate quite a broad story. Sometimes it's easier to get quickly to the real nub of things. I'm a turnaround CFO, or I'm a GM who's been running studios, companies of teams of 300 plus people in multiple locations. I'm looking for my next role in XYZ. Being able to switch between those things can help you stay front of mind and understand your specialization.
The best things to say are, remind me of your specialization within your function or what you've been doing lately. Tell me what locations are interesting to you. Tell me what domain is interesting to you. Remind me of company size, the metrics, the revenue, the growth you've seen, user growth, headcount growth. Something that just shows kind of where you've been, where you've grown through. Welcome everybody back to The Executive Edge. Today we're going to talk about the third part of our three-part series. Episode 1 was prep for the job search. Episode 2 was all about networking. And today we're talking about the role of the headhunter. Today I have with me, as usual, is the co-host of the show, Gerard Miles, and I'll let him do a quick intro on himself. Then we're happy to jump in on the role of what we do.
Hey, Dan, thanks for the intro. And how are you doing this week? We've had a lot of back to school start of the autumn coughs and colds and COVID going around. Has that reached you over in the US, or is that just confined to these isles?
No, I think it's reached here. Although I never leave my house. I'm always focused on the work, and so I didn't get sick. Although next week I'm traveling to Montreal to meet candidates that we have in process for a client. So might get sick then.
How's the Montreal scene, actually? I haven't caught up with it recently. How's Montreal doing? I suppose you'll know in a couple of weeks' time.
I'll know then. But I think it's always been a great place for the games domain specifically, and consumer tech in Canada as well. So excited to get a sense of the pulse and meet up with candidates we've had in this active today and previously active as well.
Nice. We've done a bit of work there, haven't we? Both in Montreal proper and with Quebec City as well. So there's quite a lot going on there as a hub around tech and consumer.
Yeah, Montreal was quite the hotspot 4 or 5 years ago, and I think still is in a lot of ways. So I'll give you the full readout. Maybe we'll do a mission one offsite.
Won't go off piste here, but I think it's quite an interesting one where they attracted a lot of investment, didn't they, from companies like Ubisoft, and they did deals at a sort of governmental or local government level of attracting investment. I think, was it maybe 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago? So it's kind of an interesting case study, because a lot of people in the UK were always looking for investment, right? How do we boost growth? How are we sort of incentivizing more companies to come over here? So I think it's quite an interesting one. We'll get your updates. Next podcast, we'll be looking forward to those juicy updates.
Yeah, I think, not to go too far, but I think it was kind of the archetype for what, Riyadh is trying to do from a games ecosystem standpoint. 20 years ago, and now it's this, I think massive hub.
Yeah, Riyadh's doing it with a slightly bigger budget, I suppose, buying EA. That happened recently, so we don't know when this podcast's going out, but the EA deal acquisition for $55 billion, I think it's the largest take private in corporate history. Is that right? Something like that, something extraordinary. So interesting to see games and Riyadh and Saudi Arabia making that move. But that could be a separate podcast, which is not the focus of this conversation. We're going to talk about the role of the headhunter, Dan. We're going to be talking about ourselves to a degree, and our colleagues across the world in executive search.
I think last episode we touched on this a little bit, and maybe better just to take it from the top. How do you define different recruiting firms? How do you think about contingent versus retain? Maybe just give us the high level to start us off.
This episode is very much aimed at people who, as I said, are in the job search or thinking about the job search in the future. And we've dealt previously with the prep work and some of the application. And on this episode, we just want to dig that a little bit deeper into how do you what's the sort of behind the scenes magic, as it were, or the behind the scenes secrets of executive search professionals like ourselves, and how give you advice on what we see from our side of the table and help you navigate that relationship. Starting with some jargon busting then. So executive search, retained search, headhunters, that language typically refers to professional service individuals who are at a third party company. So like ourselves, Mission One, they're at a headhunting company who are working directly for a client on a specific project that they've been paid an upfront retainer on it. So typically they are exclusively working on that search. It's typically a very critical search to the organization, which is why they're not maybe doing it through their own internal teams, or it's particularly tricky, or there's some sort of reason they don't have the resources either to do the role, or they want to audit and check, against with a third party that they've really looked across the market to the highest degree. So retained search is sort of lower volume, longer length in search. Our searches tend to be around about just under 90 days, I think, is the average, but they can go all the way to 6 months or beyond that sometimes. Again, there's often factors that go into that. So that's some of the retained elements, and it's very sort of white gloved is another expression for it, in terms of it's high on having covered the whole market, acting as a partner, as a key advisor to the client whom you're working for to help them make the best decisions. The hire is still very much made by the client. It is a partnership, right? And it's not, hey, we just make the hire for you, or that the client really has a passive role in this, a very active role in it, but you're the sort of the guides or the consultants on how to make those hires. Dan, anything I've missed there? And then perhaps you can outline us what contingent headhunting looks like and what the difference is.
No, I think you set it out great. And I think most people don't realize that, executive recruiters typically are not posting the jobs. They're working with, the company kind of in a stealth mode to find candidates, so 8, 10, 12 candidates sometimes that are highly qualified, sometimes fewer if it's a very, refined scorecard, to introduce to the role. And companies don't necessarily want to advertise that they're hiring for these specific jobs or put that out there that they're, missing, a key executive in a certain area. To answer your question, or to kind of highlight the contingent side, these are more high volume, fast pace, some, usually more junior to mid-level roles. And sometimes companies will hire or bring in multiple, contingent firms. And so the recruiters in those firms need to move as fast as possible to introduce candidates before the window closes there, or before they stop taking resumes, or before someone else introduces you first, right? Because then they won't get credit, right? So they're often working, essentially for free until they are successful in a placement.
That's right. So they're charging they only make their money right at the place of placement, or they might have a small container, but it's contingent on success.
Exactly. So it's high volume, high volume. Maybe they're working on 20, 25, 30 different kinds of searches. If they're lucky, they can specialize in they're just placing engineers, or just placing a very, a set of 1 or 2 or 3 at most types of profiles. And so there's a lot of complementary work that they're doing, and that can help them achieve, very high margins. But otherwise, they're moving as fast as they can. They're thinking about different candidate pools. They're spamming in a lot of ways, outreach to try to get the volume they need to achieve what they need to do.
Yeah. And I think to bring it, I think there's a great outline there, Dan. I think to bring it to the listener, it is a case of why is that interesting or helpful to know it is, I think we'd advise people to sort of understand who you're working with, right? And the questions you could ask if you get reached out to somebody: are you retained on this project? Are you contingent? Are you exclusive on this project? How many, again, you could ask more questions, right? If you get reached out to, how many times have you worked with this client is interesting to know. How deep do you know the culture? And not all of that is actual, but I think it helps a candidate build a picture of who they're working with. And you're asking questions about specialism. How deeply do they know your sector? How broad they are in terms of function as well. Are they generalist functions, doing all sorts of functions within one sector? So they might work in healthcare or fintech or games. but do they do all functions across that, or are they just focused on CFOs or CTOs and they work across many different sectors? Just helps you build up that portfolio, because I think I'd say I'd recommend candidates to probably have relationships, if you're sort of activate career, with a number of different types of headhunter across different areas. Is that reasonable? What do you think to that?
Absolutely. I think maybe once a week or once every other week, I'll meet somebody out there who is navigating this for the first time, and they'll say, okay, well, are we exclusive? Do I need to sign some paperwork with you? And no, it's really none of that. It's behooves the candidate to meet as many executive recruiters in their space as possible. But the key element there is in their space, right? Because there's generalist recruiters, there's recruiters that are very focused on the clients they want to work with, or the companies they want to be at, or the function they're in, or the stage they want to be at as well. So maybe best, Gerard, to kind of break this out from an executive recruiting standpoint, the kinds of firms there's, obviously the large Shreks, all the way to boutique, but how do you think about the different firms out there, or how do you advise candidates to, kind of engage with these firms?
Yeah, it's a good question. And actually, you raised a point there about sometimes we get asked by candidates, do I need to sign something with you? Or what do you charge? As in, we're charging the candidate. So on that point, there are agencies out there which are more candidate focused, and they will charge some sort of retainer or some sort of model to promote your profile to companies. So that's sort of slightly mirrored to what we do as headhunters, which is we're working for the client, only paid by the client, finding them candidates. There are firms that will represent you to the market. Again, very different type of model there. So it's a good point to raise. To your question, Dan, about the different types of headhunting firms. So again, good to just give people context. There's a few very large executive search firms out there, nicknamed the Shreks. It's an acronym. People will be familiar with companies like a Korn Ferry, Heidrick & Struggles, Spencer Stewart, Russell Reynolds, etc. So these tend to be, or are, large multinational organizations. They've got tens of offices, if not more. They'll have hundreds or thousands of employees, and they will have a very broad coverage of many, many different areas. They will tend to be a little bit more high volume because they've got much higher cost base. So you'll find those partners are going to be working on more searches. The boutiques we'll get on to, which Mission 1, Dan and I at a boutique. So they will tend to be, if we think about, again, in your network, in your pattern, they will tend to be probably very strong on listed company work. They're doing a lot of the top Fortune 500, FTSE, big listed companies will tend to use Shrek firms, just as, McKinsey or the big accounting firms like Deloitte, they're going to pick up a lot of that work. There's a sort of brand security in that, and a network that they've developed there. So you'll find that they'll have bigger teams as well. So you'll find that a partner at those firms is probably more focused, or some of them will be much more focused on effectively sales. You're bringing in clients, looking after clients, organizing a big team, making sure everyone is fed in terms of the work coming in. And then sort of as they're moving up the ranks, or sort of below that level, you'll get the more execution-focused individuals. So depending on where you are, again, good to get a sense of if you're trying to build a relationship with a partner and this stand off, it might be because they're more sales-focused, and it might be more somebody at a director level or a principal level, or even a senior associate level that might be a better realistic profile for you to know, to keep thinking about you in terms of putting you onto searches. And it'll be different from a client perspective. You'll want to get to know the partners who probably won't be doing the work, but they'll be sort of, that'll be their neck on the line for them. So that's a high level view of some of these sort of bigger headhunting firms, sort of very great breadth of international coverage and lots of people to give, a security there, but it tends to be a bit more higher volume what they're doing. And again, it's a little bit less. It's a little bit more of a sales process. You talk to the partner and then you're passed on to an execution team if you're on the client side.
I think within these large firms, there's teams of people that are focused on different areas, different domains, different functions, and then the smaller you go, there's medium-sized firms all the way to boutiques. They'll generally be focused on a set of functions or maybe one function if they're hyper specialized. Boutiques, and sometimes these are partners coming out of these larger firms that are very fantastic at just knowing product, or just knowing engineering leaders, or just knowing go-to-market leaders, or just knowing an asset class like venture capital, PE, or public for a specific subset of candidates as well, right? So I advise candidates to get to know the large firms because there's teams there that are working on roles that would be relevant to them, but also get to know boutique firms as well, where there will be specialized people that are working on roles that even the large firms won't see because they're very focused on a specific set of candidates, and it behooves you to know them as well.
Another good sort of lens of looking at it, Dan, is also, as you're saying, they'll know different types of clients. So again, if you're looking at large listed clients, probably the Shreks will have a broader coverage there. If you're focused on different asset classes, again, it's a good question to ask because there will be specialists in, if you're really keen to go work for a private equity firm, there will be specialists who know all the PE firms. They're working with their investor teams or their executive internal recruitment teams within the funds, and they'll be across their portfolio looking at different roles. There might be a specialist in CTOs for SaaS companies for private equity, something like that. Similarly, the venture capital backed companies, so earlier stage, if you really want to go join Series B, Series C type company that's high growth, a bit more risk, but much higher potential upside. The larger firms really struggle with that because their fee model is very high, which suits, the upfront cash model is very high, which doesn't suit early stage as well. And you've got founders who are hesitant about paying 150, 200K in retainers. So again, you'll have specialists, often slightly smaller or more specialized firms that will work with those earlier stage companies and founders, which could be, again, if you want to go join the next Uber or whatever it is, when they're still small, these guys will actually know those roles, but it's slightly more risk reward type proposition.
Gerard, let's talk about one, how to find these recruiters and then how to engage with them next. When you are advising a candidate, maybe you know their space well, or maybe you don't. How do you tell them to go and find the specific recruiters within these large firms? Or how do you tell them to go and find specific search firms that are specialized in their areas? Like what are some ways they can do that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different tools at your disposal. Obviously, some of the larger firms I've mentioned there are not hard to find, right? Google is your friend. We're all using ChatGPT and AI searching as well to get an initial layer of ideas. And then I think it's going sort of deeper into, again, people not all headhunters are equal, right, as well. And they're not all right fit for you. So I think that's at a very sort of surface level is doing your desk research. And then the next level is, again, tapping into your network. It's a theme we keep coming back to in these podcasts, but who else is out there? And then you can also ask headhunters. Again, we're not all keen to advertise all our competitors, but again, if you've got a good relationship with a good one headhunter, you could say, hey, I just want to understand your space. I appreciate your competitors, but particularly if there's not an active role you're on with them, it might be just something they can do for you as a favor. And say, like, who else is operating in your space, right? Or like, what are the trade-offs? Again, take it with a pinch of salt. Again, they might give you a slightly more biased view of like, you should stick with us. But again, I think that can be a good way of asking either people who've got jobs, like, who did you talk to? And there's a lot of individual reputations, right, of who was actually really good to work with, who was very responsive, who ran a good, smooth process versus, actually, I did work with them, but they didn't talk to me for 6 months and then, it wasn't a good experience or whatever it was there. So you're building up that intel or market flow can be good. And then, again, sort of being proactive on LinkedIn and having a look around can also help you out find, sort of seeing who's active and in your space could be good. Who's posting about the themes that you're interested in could just also be a good signal that a headhunter is a good fit for understanding your profile.
I think that's great advice, as well as I typically advise candidates to engage with recruiters that reached out to them in the past. Hopefully you didn't just ghost them or ignore them. And I think if you do get an outreach, even if you're not looking, it's good just to take an intro call so you can be kind of top of mind or have a relationship already started when you are looking for a role. I think ask your peers who were placed into roles, what recruiters they worked with to do that, or what search firm helped them into that role. Or if you see a search firm connecting with or posting about placing somebody at a company you admire, I think reaching out to just get connected to that search firm, because chances are they're working with them again if they did a great job the first time as well, right? I think certain companies work with certain firms because they've been successful with those firms, and so they'll continue to do that.
And I think looping it back to that, what we were talking about earlier, Dan, is a really good point, because understanding the kind of firm is important and the kind of headhunter you're approaching, because then that'll help you understand how much they understand your profile, right? In terms of, you want to connect with headhunters who are really going to understand your profile quite quickly, who are going to instantly be thinking of, oh, my client XYZ probably wants to talk to you, or I know a bunch of investors who would be interested in you, versus another person who might be more tangentially interested in your sector, or has done one search there, or isn't really focused on you. You'll find the sort of the reward to effort ratio is much lower with those individuals versus what you're talking about, is which bit of research, or mixing that outreach with the research of who you really should be on the radar of, will I think help you out a lot and save you some pain, because it can be, let's confess it, Dan, like it can be sort of frustrating to work with headhunters, I think, particularly if you're active in a job and you keep reaching out to someone and they just can't really help you. They might be sort of friendly or not, but there's a bit of, you will get some friction with some headhunters. Don't necessarily give up on all headhunters. It might just be that fit there isn't quite right, or that, and you can always ask as well, be like, how many people like me do you place in a year or in the last 2 years? If they say, I've done one search, you're like, great, okay, well that gives you a ratio of, okay, we'll touch in every 6 to 12 months, but I'm, versus somebody's like, yeah, I do it every 3 months. I'm placing someone like you might like, okay, well let's check in every 2 months, right? Or something like that, if you're more active.
That's a good point. I think your time is valuable as well. Being smart and focused in your approach, and knowing which headhunters, recruiters are working on roles that regularly that fit you, versus some recruiters are generalists and they focus on many different roles, many different functions, and may only place someone like you once a year, maybe if that as well, right? So being focused and knowing who specializes on your function, your stage, companies that are in your space, competitors as well, I think is important, and stay in touch with those folks more frequently. What's a way to engage with these search firms in terms of, or recruiters specifically, in terms of kind of staying maybe top of mind, or articulating your interests as well? Maybe you have an intro call with them, or maybe you need to have an intro call with them. What's the best way to kind of articulate that or reach out, you think?
Having quite a clear, I think headhunters are looking to understand your profile quickly and easily, and helping them in that is going to save you time. So I think sometimes people can sort of want to communicate quite a broad story and feel like they want to tell you many different things, which is sometimes really helpful. Sometimes it's easier to get quickly to the real nub of things, right? The real, hey, I'm a turnaround CFO, or I'm a GM who's been running studios, or whatever it is, right? For companies of teams of 300 plus people in multiple locations. I'm looking for my next role in XYZ. So being able to switch between those things, again, some I can't speak for everyone. Some people might love the tell me, and I've worked with people who want to know from your childhood, right? Like when I started headhunting, it's a very sort of classic question of like, what did your parents do, right? Like it's sort of, needing to understand that. And so there will be some headhunters who want to go right back and understand every area, getting a sense of that, but also understanding that some headhunters will be under pressure, again, particularly if you're a profile that's maybe not really core to what they're doing all the time, might be a bit more tangential, understanding, okay, if I have X role coming up, I should call you about it. And I think sometimes, again, people don't want to, I can understand some people like push back against that, because they're like, well, actually, there could be quite a lot of things that could be relevant that I don't want to be missed out for. But I would advise people that they might underestimate that is harming them to get any calls about anything, because you've not given an easy hook to headhunters. Again, it will depend on the headhunter and how specialized they are. But I think having that clear articulation of every headhunter will ask you at some point, what do you want to do next? Or the question I sort of phrase it as, if you're thinking about the next 5 years of your career, which is your precious years, what would be really meaningful, exciting for you to do? And having some articulation of that, I think, it's crisp, easy to hook onto, can help you stay front of mind and understand your specialization. Dan, what would you add to that, or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's funny that you said that. In early days of recruiting, it was, what did your parents do? I remember asking those kinds of questions, 10, 15 years ago as well. Moving it forward to today, the best way candidates can engage with me, maybe we've had an intro call. Ideally, we've had an intro call, or we've been in touch, we've started a relationship, and you want to follow up. I think the best things to say are, one, remind me of your specialization within your function, or what you've been doing lately. Tell me what locations are interesting to you, or if you're remote only, or if it's hybrid. Tell me what domain is interesting to you moving forward. Ideally, it's the same one you've been in. And then remind me of, again, the company size, the metrics, the revenue, the growth you've seen, user growth, headcount growth. Something that just shows kind of where you've been, where you've grown through. So that way, I or other headhunters know what stage you fit in, or what stages you fit in as well, right? And on top of that, it's good to articulate what you're trying to do next, right? What do you want to be in 5 years? What is the next role? What's the next role that's important to you as well? If you're really ambitious, I think include maybe some highlights of what you've been doing as well, right? Like below that, like here's what I'm trying to do next. Here's where I've been, but also here's some career highlights, right? That are easily shareable. Because if you're looking for an advisor role, or you're looking for a next role, or if I don't have a role for you, but I need to connect you, or I want to connect you to talent partners at venture capital firms, I want to connect you to, executive recruiting teams at clients of mine that I just don't have a role for right now, or they're just, in my network and we share candidates. It's easy for me to say, hey, do you want to meet this person?
That's a behind the scenes view, isn't it, actually? Because you might not be aware, often we'll write a short email with 3-4 bullet points about what this person's done, achievement, something like that. And then maybe another bullet point titled timing, motivation, location, something like that, or comp. So I think what you're saying, Dan, is a follow-up, right? And you're saying as email follow-up after you've spoken to a headhunter is, if you want to write them those notes, that makes it so much easier for them to just, copy and paste that into an email and say, hey, here's XY candidate. We had a great conversation with them. Here, in their own words, here's some of their achievements. What do you think? Right? That'd be more in an open intro type scenario. And that's probably what's happening, right? You might not be aware of it, but that email would have been written about you if you've had these kind of conversations with headhunters, said like, I'll introduce you to a client, that's not a role, but that they'll hand on some notes. So if you do that work for them, you control that a lot more, right? You're putting it in your own writing. So that's beneficial for you, that you're not going to lose anything in translation. And B, you're more likely that follow-up happens in a speedy manner, right? Because again, headhunters have long lists of to-do. So it's a double benefit. I like that. I like that tip.
Like on top of the actual client work that we're doing, which is many, many hours, a day, a week, we're doing intro calls with candidates that we don't know yet. We're trying to build relationships, right? And we don't necessarily have an active role for those people, but we do have an active network that we can help them and get connected to, especially if they're actively looking today. Or sometimes it's just, hey, we want to build our network with investors and build our network, right? And so it's just make it easy for us to help you get connected, right, as a candidate, right? And so we do that often and consistent, day to day, week to week.
Dan, how frequently should people be checking in with headhunters? We sort of covered this a little bit earlier, but what's your instincts here on what's not enough or what's too much in your opinion?
It depends on how active you are, I guess. I have people reaching out to me monthly to check in, just to say, hey, I'm still looking for a role, or hey, my criteria have changed in a role. I have people check in with me quarterly. I do maybe annual calls with some people that are non-active. I guess it just depends on how actively you're looking for a role. I don't mind kind of the monthly check-ins at all. I think just don't be surprised if I just don't have a role for you. I'll do my best to try to connect people. I don't know. That's a tough one. What do you think? Like, what's your preference?
I think it's understanding the relevancy or the ability to help, right? And being responsive to that. If someone is, and I get sometimes people reaching out to me about fintech roles or something that I just, I'm not a specialist in, right? So it's sort of a case of, it's a bit bewildering for me for a start. But then if you're regularly checking in with me, or maybe I spoke to you 10 years ago when I was doing industrials headhunting and you're checking back in, it's, I think as we're hanging out, awareness is helpful of is it relevant? If it is, you can take a guidance from the headhunt, say, hey, what's the sensible cadence, right? To check in. So you can always ask, like everything in life. And it will vary. And I think, again, the closer or more absolutely core you are to the work that the headhunters are doing, the more they'll want to be hearing from you, right? If you're at a great company and you're a VP of product in a great consumer mobile games company, something like that, for me, I'm doing a lot of that work. VP product, mobile, particularly in games and broad consumer. So if you're in that space, I probably do want to be hearing from you a lot. Whereas if you're, really tangential to, going back to that, like how relevant, it's probably good to say, like, just check in, once 6 months and probably even just hey, just reminding you here, exactly as you said, like I'm looking, not necessarily asking for a follow-up or a lot of time necessarily back, because I think that can be just a bit of a, we want to help people, but again, it can just feel, just the personal level from our side can be I feel a bit of a bind here. I want to spend time with this person because I'm, incentivized to be a people pleaser, and often headhunters are people pleasers, just as a personality trait. They get that rush. A lot of people in professional services are. So they want to help, but then they're also sort of feeling a bit guilty because they're thinking, I don't really know how I can help you because I probably don't have anything relevant to your experience. So just a light touch in as an update without could you review my CV, or like, can we have a call, could be a good way to just help out a headhunter. And then again, that creating that good sense of, hey, I saw that email, I felt good about it, will help them think about you positively when a good role comes in as well.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to just knowing what recruiters are focused on your space and then building relationship with them and maintaining touch. I do have candidates that reach out to me from years and years ago, and I'm no longer focused on their space or geo or domain. And it's just like, okay, I may not even know who was working on those kinds of roles anymore, right? And so I try to do my best to move the needle on their job search and help them, get connected to the right people. But multiple inbounds a day for that kind of stuff as well.
One point that just occurs to me, Dan, as we're talking about it, because we talked a lot about that sort of individual relationship, but also remember, when we're talking about sort of that articulation of your expertise and keeping it crisp, that these notes will be going on their internal system, and they might have tick box categories that other people will be searching. They might be searching free text, but again, giving them a sense of that crispness is important, because they could be, again, it's not necessarily the person you've spoken to who's ingesting that information. It could be somebody, a colleague on the other side of the world, right? That's looking at that or searching, and you want your name to come up again. So just to return to an earlier point around that articulation, or helping headhunters and giving them articulation, give them information that can be useful to digestion without the whole context, or without actually even having had that conversation with that person, because it might be one of their colleagues you really want to pick up the phone to when they've got the right role.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, large search firms or any search firm will have an internal database. They'll have notes, even if you haven't been in touch with that search firm for 6 months or a year. Sometimes it's good just to check and say, refresh them on the latest as well, so they can keep you top of mind for relevant roles that are coming out that maybe your new metrics or your new achievements are more relevant for than your past ones were.
Dan, how does one stand out to a headhunter, right? So let's say you've identified someone you've got 2-3 headhunters in your sector on your radar, thinking, I want to keep on the right side of these people. They've got access to these great roles. I want to be impressive with them so they feel very comfortable about proposing me to a client. What would be some tips you could give someone who's done their identification and now wants to improve or develop that relationship even further?
Great question. I think it's being responsive even when you're not looking for a role. It's having a great first call, even if you're not looking for a role, doing the intro call, getting to know them, being able to articulate your achievements, your metrics. I had a call recently with a candidate a couple weeks ago that is fantastic, is uniquely positioned, but also beyond those things was able to share a couple of high-level names that would be references that were kind of well-known, marquee interesting names in the domain that would be, an immediate reference for them. Being able to articulate kind of the things I talked about as well, location, domain, achievements, their specialization, and having a concise story around that was interesting. I think, being able to articulate your achievements, but all yours also potential references that are interesting names, I think are really stand out.
I think that's right. So being able to make references is a way of giving comfort to a headhunter who maybe doesn't know you, being able to reference good people and say, look, that they'll vouch for me, and that can be stored by the headhunter. I think other things I'd suggest would be showing real partnership to headhunters. Headhunters will be looking for other roles. I mean, a lot of candidates will say to me, look, if you're ever trying to get an intro to someone, if you ever want advice on the market, let me know. And I really appreciate that. And occasionally I'm taking them up. And a lot of our job actually as headhunters is referencing in the market, and it's sort of invisible work because people don't know it's necessarily even happening at the time, or, we've referenced people before you even reached out to them, right? It's sort of behind the scenes. And being able to say, hey, I'll open my network up to you as the headhunter is a nice way to build that relationship, right? And be able to, it's a quid pro quo type relationship of, again, they're more like to take the call from you and give you their best and most thoughtful advice on what's looking in market, or where to go, etc. I think the other thing just to, and it should be table stakes, but again, we work on senior roles with executives 15, 20 years. We still sometimes see, bad candidate behavior in terms of not being responsive, ghosting, mucking about in interviews, raising things late in the process that they've assured us weren't going to be an issue. I mean, the one that really stands out to me is an individual who said he'd moved to Thailand, and for 3 months said, yep, cleared it with the family, snowboard. And then we got to near interview and said, yeah, I've spoken to my wife about it, she's not keen. You're like, well, that's, clearly you hadn't actually, again, I hope that's an example of something that's obviously not very helpful, but it doesn't leave a great impression with the header. And again, there's a strong candidate with a good executive track record, but you're not, that person is not going to want to put you front of the shortlist ever again because they had that bad experience. So, I think sort of thinking around that and just being consistent, and it's okay to say you've changed your mind, absolutely, but just be honest, right? And again, the ghost, Dan and I, we've seen this many times, is a candidate who goes quiet in a process, midway through a process, they get another offer that they're tempted by. So they just ghost you for a week, 10 days, and they come back saying, I'm so sorry, I've accepted another offer. And sort of let you know, it's really obvious. Now we know, right? We know that 9 times out of 10, that's probably what's happening. So it's not like you're actually concealing any secret, and it's much better to say like, hey, I've got another offer, I want to put this on hold. Is that okay, right? And that's a much better experience than just disappearing on someone and then coming back with a bit of a sort of surprise type note, because again, it impacts the project. You don't look great in front of your client if your candidate's suddenly gone dark on you. So just have an empathy to the headhunter situation as well. And there's always a right way to do these things, even if it's a message the headhunters want to hear. If you do it in the right way, it can actually be a really good response of, okay, that person was open and transparent with me, and I like them still, even though they're pulling out late in a process or whatever it is.
I think candidates can help themselves out significantly by being transparent. It may not be what the recruiter wants to hear. You may have another offer. You may have an offer imminent, but it could also help you, because that, the other process could accelerate, right? You could inform the recruiter, hey, I'm getting an offer, and then they may be able to help their client accelerate. So that way you have a competing offer and something to compare, and you may end up taking that offer instead, right? So, our job is to, help the client find somebody for the role, but also we can help you kind of maximize your opportunities, or we can simply tell you, hey, the offer you're getting is a great one. You should take that, right? Because we may know more about what's going on in the other process as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we've seen tangible examples there of if the candidate communicates more openly, that there were options that could be taken, right? The process could be sped up, the offer could be increased, location could be relooked at if that was an issue. There's different things that one could look at and adjust, which both positive examples of where that's happened and we've adjusted them, and that's a great result for the candidate. They get better comp, different role, whatever it is they're looking for. And on the other side of that, we've seen candidates who maybe miss out because they sort of say like, oh, I didn't realize that was possible, but I've already accepted the other job. You're like, well, if we'd known 2 weeks ago then or a week ago, then, we could have got ahead of this and maybe given you a better option.
I feel like it's such a common occurrence that someone they'll have met a company earlier in the process. They'll get into another interview process and they'll say, well, actually, I'm about to go, they're going to give me an offer, and they don't give the other company a chance to catch up. They may like that company more. They must assume it's just not a possibility. And they just go and they take an offer that maybe they wouldn't have preferred.
No, I think it's good advice. Keep communication levels high, and it's in your benefit as well. I think we'd say that to candidates as well as I think it's helping everyone in the process. Sam, anything else we're missing here? I think we've talked about different types of headhunters, done some jargon busting there. Hopefully we've given you, as a listener, a behind the scenes view of some of the things we're thinking about as headhunters when we're looking at candidates and some of the best ways to use us. And see the benefits. I think one benefit we didn't maybe talk enough about the benefits of boutique firms. Well, we should do a little bit of that. Of the boutique firms, you'll often have you'll have partners who tend to be a lot more involved in the search. Right, they're doing probably more across both the client side, management side, as well as the execution. Something we really pride ourselves on at Mission One is being really hands deep into that execution. So whoever you're dealing with, you're getting that high level view and the in-depth view of the headhunter you're working with. Anything else that we missed out on there, Dan, we should cover?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about boutiques, they are often hyper specialized on a specific area or function and area. And so it really behooves you to get to know them. That might be harder to find. You may just need to ask questions of, who is a boutique? If you know a recruiter that's specialized in your area, like who are the boutiques as well that are in this area? Because they were often partners at scale that are now hyper specialized on a specific domain or function or both, and they'll be working on big roles that you may not otherwise get to see. I know quite a few examples of this today. As well. So it really behooves you, I think, just ask the questions, do some networking, build your network out across the Shreks, across the mid-tiers, and then across the boutiques, and get to know the recruiters that are really focused with a long-term view on your domain.
Great to talk to you about this topic. It's obviously one close to our hearts, and we hope that, again, as listeners, we always sort of say, these tend to be practical and helpful. So let us know. Reach out directly, DM us, leave a comment on whatever you're listening to. If you've got further tips about how to leverage that relationship with headhunters, how you can advance your career with them, we're happy to hear your questions and answer them. Or if there are any other follow-up topics as well, you'd say, hey, I'd love to go even deeper on X or Y, let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thanks, Sarah. Until next time, take care.
All right, take care.
That's another episode of Mission One, The Executive Edge. If you found this valuable, hit subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other professionals discover the show.
Have a question about executive hiring or want to share your own experience? Reach out on LinkedIn or visit missionone.io/podcast. We read everything, and your stories often inspire future episodes.
The Executive Edge is brought to you by Mission One, where we specialize in placing senior leaders at tech, entertainment, and AI companies. Learn more at missionone.io.
Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you again soon on The Executive Edge.